In the heart of a glimmering coastal city, where boutique shops gleamed beneath glass towers and private cars lined the boulevards, stood Maison Lumiere, a renowned fine dining restaurant perched on the edge of a scenic waterfront. Its name evoked elegance, and its reputation ensured a wait list months long. Inside, everything whispered prestige, from the cascading chandelier made of imported Murano glass to the walls lined with hand-painted silk panels. The staff moved with mechanical grace, dressed in tailored uniforms and trained to anticipate needs before a word was spoken. That evening, the restaurant was at full capacity. Patrons in evening wear dined under the golden light, their conversations soft, their laughter restrained. At the center of it all stood Victor Langford, the restaurant's owner, a man as meticulous as the silverware he demanded be polished twice before dinner service. With his salt and pepper hair slicked back, tailored navy suit, and icy composure, Victor ruled Maison Lumiere with unwavering authority. For him, reputation was everything. Meanwhile, Elliot, a new waiter just a few months into his job, was still finding his rhythm in this world of perfection. Friendly and eager, he'd been trained to never let a customer see his nerves. But something about tonight's guest list was different. Something, or rather, someone, unexpected walked through the heavy glass doors. A man, clearly past his 70s, entered quietly. His clothes were worn, a faded overcoat, shoes scuffed and thin. His white hair peeked out under a threadbare cap, and though his face was clean, his skin carried the soft grime of a man who'd spent time in the elements. Yet, his posture was upright, and his eyes scanned the room not with desperation, but with wonder. For a brief moment, a smile flickered across his lined face. Elliot noticed him immediately. Before the host could react, Elliot stepped forward and greeted the man with a gentle nod. "Good evening, sir. May I help you with a table?" The old man's voice was low, a little raspy, but kind. "Yes. If it's not too much trouble. Just one seat, near the window if possible. I'd like to look at the harbor." Elliot didn't hesitate. He led the man to a table in the corner, close enough to see the city lights reflecting on the waves. Patrons glanced sideways, eyebrows raised at the man's humble appearance. But Elliot remained composed. As the man sat, he sighed contentedly. "Beautiful place," he said. "I've passed by it for years, always wondering what it looked like inside." Elliot smiled. "It's even better with the food." The man chuckled. "That's what they say. I'd love to know the special tonight." Elliot leaned in. "Tonight, our chef prepared a rosemary seared duck breast with truffle palm puree and glazed pearl onions. It's one of our finest." The man's eyes lit up. "That sounds incredible. I've never had anything like that. Would you like to try it?" He hesitated. "Let me just look over the menu for a bit." As Elliot nodded and returned to the server's station, Victor had already seen the entire interaction. From across the dining room, his gaze locked onto the old man like a hawk spotting prey. His jaw tightened. "Elliot," Victor called in a hushed but commanding tone. Elliot approached quickly. "Yes, Mr. Langford?" Victor didn't look away from the guest. "What is he doing here?" "He requested a table, sir." "I thought." "You thought?" Victor snapped, his tone sharp as broken glass. "This is not a soup kitchen. Look around. Do you see anyone else here in second-hand shoes and a patched coat?" Elliot's heart dropped. He's been polite. He hasn't caused any disturbance. Victor narrowed his eyes. "He doesn't belong here. Do you think our clientele wants to dine next to that?" He whispered, motioning toward a couple now whispering uncomfortably at a neighboring table. "Escort him out. Now." Elliot looked back at the old man, who was now gazing out the window with peaceful eyes, completely unaware of the storm brewing around him. "Sir." Elliot began, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Are you sure?" Victor's stare turned colder. "Do it. Or I'll do it myself." With slow steps and a lead-heavy heart, Elliot returned to the table. The man looked up with a gentle smile. "Did you find out if the special's still available?" Elliot's voice trembled slightly. "Sir. I'm really sorry, but perhaps you'd feel more comfortable somewhere else this evening. A place a bit more casual." The old man paused. He looked down at the tablecloth, then back up. His eyes no longer sparkled. They were hollow now, filled with the quiet ache of disappointment. But he didn't raise his voice. He simply nodded. "I understand," he said softly. "I suppose I never really belonged here, anyway." Elliot wanted to protest, to stop him, but the man had already stood and picked up his worn cap. As he walked away, he turned slightly. "I just wanted to see what it felt like. To try something fine. Something my son used to dream about. He said one day he'd cook in a place just like this." And then, with that quiet confession hanging in the air, he exited the restaurant. Elliot stood frozen, heart pounding. Victor gave a dismissive glance toward the door. "Good. Now clear the table and get back to real guests." But Elliot couldn't shake the man's words. He said his son wanted to cook in a place like this. A seed of curiosity took root. "Sir," Elliot said slowly, looking back at Victor. "Did you hear his name?" Victor waved him off. "No, and I don't care." "I think you should," Elliot said, his voice quiet but firm. "He said his name was Harold. Harold Evans." The name stopped Victor cold. His face drained of color. A forgotten chapter from decades ago slammed into him with the force of a wave. The school cafeteria. The warm meals. The gentleman who never judged him for wearing the same shirt 3 days in a row. The one who used to say, "Don't worry, Victor. One day, you'll make meals that matter." "Harold," Victor whispered. The room around him faded. All he could think about was the man he'd just turned away. Victor Langford stood still in the middle of his own restaurant, the air around him suddenly feeling thicker, heavier. Harold. The name echoed inside his chest like a bell struck in a quiet cathedral. He hadn't heard that name in decades. The restaurant continued to hum around him, cutlery clinking, murmurs of guests, the hiss of searing pans from the kitchen. But Victor heard none of it now. All he could picture was the cramped school cafeteria he'd spent so many childhood afternoons in, the chipped plastic trays, the long metal tables, and one man who had made that space feel like home. Harold Evans. The quiet man behind the counter who always saved the last scoop of warm mashed potatoes for him. Who sometimes slipped an extra slice of bread onto his plate when he thought no one was looking. Who remembered his name when most of the world forgot he existed. When his father drank too much and his mother worked double shifts, Harold was there. Every day. Victor had grown up hungry, not just for food, but for stability. For kindness. And Harold, the school cook with a patient smile and a heart the size of a city, had provided both. Victor blinked, the present rushing back to meet him. He turned sharply to Elliot, whose brows were furrowed in concern. "Where's he?" "I don't know," Elliot replied, still stunned by the sudden change in his boss. "He just walked out." Victor didn't wait another second. He rushed through the restaurant, ignoring the curious looks of diners and the whispered confusion of staff. He pushed through the large glass doors and into the street. The night air hit him like a slap, cold and sharp. He scanned the sidewalks, the storefronts, the benches near the marina just beyond the road. But Harold was nowhere in sight. "Did you see an elderly man leave just now?" he asked the valet stationed out front. The valet, taken aback, pointed down the street. "Yeah, went that way. Toward the promenade." Victor ran. The pavement blurred beneath his feet, his polished dress shoes clacking against the stone walkway. He didn't care about the stairs. For once, the man obsessed with dignity and image had only one thing in mind, finding Harold. He reached the promenade breathless. The harbor stretched before him, boats swaying gently in their slips. The soft lap of water against the docks filled the air. And there, near the edge, sitting on an old wooden bench, was a lone figure, hunched slightly, gazing out over the dark water. Victor slowed as he approached. "Harold?" he called, voice rough with emotion. The man turned. His face, though older, was unmistakable. The same kind eyes. The same gentle smile. He looked surprised at first, then slightly embarrassed. "Victor?" Harold said quietly, standing to his feet. "You recognized me?" Victor could barely speak. He stepped forward, and without a word, wrapped Harold in a tight, desperate hug. "I didn't," Victor choked. "Not at first. I was so caught up in the moment. In appearances. I didn't see. I'm so sorry." Harold patted his back gently, the same way he had when Victor scraped his knees at 10 years old. "It's all right. I didn't expect you to recognize me. I've changed." "No," Victor said, pulling back to look at him. "You're exactly the same. You're the same man who gave me food when I had none. Who listened when no one else cared. I owe you everything." Harold's eyes twinkled, though a sadness remained in them. "I just wanted to see what you'd become. I used to tell my wife that one day, you'd be famous. That your food would be known across the city. And I was right." Victor's face twisted with guilt. "But I turned you away. After all you did for me." "You didn't know," Harold said simply. "And I didn't come to ask for anything. I only wanted to see what you made of your dream." Victor stepped back, shaking his head. "No. That's not enough. You deserve more than just a glance from the window. Please, come back with me." Harold hesitated. "Victor, I don't want to make things difficult." "Difficult?" Victor laughed, a bitter edge in his voice. "You made things possible. When I didn't have dinner, you made sure I ate. When I thought I was worthless, you told me I had talent. You changed my life, Harold. Please. Let me at least give you dinner. A real one. From my hands." Harold finally nodded, quietly moved. "All right. I'd like that." Together, they walked back to Maison Lumiere. The wind was gentle, and the stars had come out. Pedestrians passed them by without a second glance, just two men walking side by side. But inside Victor's heart, it felt like he was walking with a part of himself he had long lost. When they arrived, the restaurant quieted. Diners glanced toward the entrance as Victor gently guided Harold through the front doors. Staff froze. Elliot watched from the corner, stunned by the transformation in his boss. Victor turned to him. "Prepare the finest table. No exceptions." He then turned to Harold. "This time, you sit. And I'll serve." As Harold sat, Victor disappeared into the kitchen, not to shout orders, but to cook. Himself. He rolled up his sleeves, put on an apron, and for the first time in years, cooked with heart instead of pride. He wasn't just making food. He was making amends. Inside the kitchen of Maison Lumiere, the energy shifted. The usual precision, controlled, cold, almost militaristic, gave way to something looser, more human. Victor's staff, used to seeing him as a rigid perfectionist barking instructions, now stood stunned as he moved quietly to the prep station himself. "Chef Langford?" one of the sous chefs asked, unsure. "Do you want us to prepare the—" "No," Victor interrupted gently. "This one's mine." He pulled a weathered notebook from his coat pocket. It wasn't the kind of leather-bound menu planner he used for high-end presentations. This was something different, smaller, older. Inside were faded, handwritten recipes from decades ago. Some were smudged with oil, others written in childish scrawl. One of them was titled, "Harold's Chicken and Potatoes." Underneath, in a younger hand, was a note, "The first meal I ever loved. Age 9. Victor exhaled slowly. This wasn't the night for truffle foam or rare-sourced caviar. This was about something real. He gathered the ingredients himself: rosemary, garlic, baby potatoes, a whole chicken. The dish wasn't fancy, but it was meaningful. He remembered every flavor, every aroma. Harold used to make it in the school cafeteria on Fridays, and Victor always looked forward to it more than any holiday meal at home. While the chicken roasted and the potatoes crisped, he added a side of slow-cooked green beans, buttered and salted just right. A gravy reduction followed. Each step carried weight, not just from the ingredients, but from memory. Meanwhile, in the dining area, Harold sat quietly at the best table in the house. The linens were flawless, the silver polished. A glass of red wine, Maison Lumiere's finest, stood at his place, untouched. He didn't want to drink without Victor. Elliot, standing nearby, leaned in. "Can I get you anything else, sir?" Harold smiled softly. "Just being here is more than enough, son. I never thought I'd see a day like this." From the far end of the room, diners whispered. Who was this man? Why was the famously intimidating Victor Langford personally serving him? And then, Victor returned, apron still on, tray in hand. He placed the dish in front of Harold with quiet ceremony. Roasted rosemary chicken with garlic potatoes. Just like you used to make me, he said. I hope I did it justice. Harold stared at the plate, eyes glossy. You remembered? I never forgot, Victor whispered. Harold picked up his fork and knife with steady hands. He took the first bite. The chicken was tender, perfectly seasoned. The potatoes still held their crisp edges, soaked in just enough garlic butter. The green beans were a mirror of his own from long ago. A soft smile formed on his face. His eyes closed for a moment. This, he said, his voice choked, this is everything I ever hoped for. Victor sat across from him now, ignoring the stares of his elite guests. None of that mattered. He poured himself a glass of the same wine and raised it in a quiet toast. To the man who fed me before I could feed myself. Harold lifted his glass in return. And to the boy who became everything he dreamed of. They clinked glasses softly. Around them, a hush had fallen across the dining room, not awkward silence, but something reverent. Even the most entitled patrons understood that something important was happening here. A moment of reckoning. A circle closing. Victor looked around and saw the restaurant through new eyes. The silk wallpaper, the gilded sconces, the six-figure wine collection, all of it had come from a dream Harold once nurtured in a scared little boy. And he had almost turned him away. I never thanked you properly, Victor said after a long pause. For everything. You didn't have to, Harold replied, chewing slowly. The fact that you made it. That you built this place and filled it with beauty. That's thanks enough. Victor lowered his eyes. But I hurt you. Tonight. Harold shook his head. We all forget. We all get caught up in the lives we've built. I wasn't angry. Just sad. But then you remembered. I want to do more than remember, Victor said. I want to honor you. You were the first person who made me feel like I mattered. I want the people who come here to know that the reason this place exists is because of you. Harold's hand stilled over his fork. Victor, you don't have to. But Victor cut him off with a soft smile. It's already decided. As the meal ended, Victor stood and addressed the dining room for the first time in years. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, raising his glass. Many of you know me as a chef, as a restaurateur. But what you don't know is that this restaurant would not exist without the man sitting at this table. Every head turned. This is Mr. Harold Evans. He was once the school cook at my elementary school. When I was young, he made sure I was fed when no one else did. He listened to me when others didn't care. And he told me I could become someone. Victor paused, voice tight with emotion. Everything you've ever eaten in this restaurant is, in some way, seasoned with the care he showed me. I owe him everything. The room erupted into applause, some confused, many moved, all respectful. Harold looked stunned. Victor leaned down and whispered, "You deserve to be known. And this is just the beginning." The waiter returned with dessert, warm apple tart with vanilla bean ice cream, just like the kind Harold made in the cafeteria on rare special days. Harold took one bite and chuckled softly. "You always were picky about presentation," he said. Victor smiled. Some habits die hard. They shared the dessert in quiet companionship, the years between them disappearing like steam off a warm plate. Outside, the harbor lights twinkled. And inside, something had been restored. The evening at Maison Lumiere lingered longer than most. Guests, normally eager to dash off to their chauffeur rides after dessert, remained seated. The room still hummed, but it was a softer, more thoughtful tone. Conversations shifted from business and politics to stories, real ones, about people who had made quiet impacts in their lives. A strange, beautiful ripple of humanity moved through the luxury. Harold, still seated at the best table in the house, dabbed the corners of his mouth with the white linen napkin. The warmth in his chest wasn't just from the food, it was the feeling of being seen, acknowledged, after so many years of simply fading into the background. Victor sat across from him, not as the celebrated chef or powerful owner, but simply as a man remembering who had once given him hope. "I never asked," Victor said, "what happened after the school closed down." Harold smiled faintly, his eyes drifting to the wine glass. "Life happened. I did a bit of this and that. Warehouse work, some gardening. I retired early when my knees started giving me trouble. I was alright for a while. Had a small pension. But I didn't plan for the long road. Didn't think I'd be alone at this age. Victor listened silently. His heart ached. Not just from guilt, but from admiration. Harold had never asked for help. Never demanded recognition. He'd given because he could. That was who he was. I want you here, Victor said suddenly. More than just for tonight. Harold blinked, surprised. Victor, I'm not sure what you mean. I want you to be part of this place. Part of the restaurant. Not as a guest, but as someone we can learn from. Harold chuckled gently. You have award-winning chefs in this kitchen. What could they possibly learn from an old man like me? Victor leaned in. You taught me how to care. That food is love, not just art. That people don't remember every ingredient, but they remember how they felt. That's what's been missing in this place. I didn't see it until tonight. Harold looked at his hands, rough and marked with time. I don't have the stamina I used to. I couldn't stand on my feet for long hours, you know. I'm not asking you to, Victor said. You could mentor. Be here a few days a week. Talk to the new staff. Tell them your stories. Teach them what food meant before it became business. You'd have your own space, your own schedule. Harold sat in silence, eyes glistening. I never imagined. Something like that. Victor reached across the table, resting his hand on Harold's. You imagined this for me, when no one else did. Let me return the favor. Harold slowly nodded, a small smile spreading across his face. Then I'd be honored. The next morning, the announcement went live on the restaurant's social pages. Maison Lumiere is proud to welcome Mr. Harold Evans as our newest culinary heritage mentor. A man who fed the heart of a boy who became a chef. Now, he feeds our purpose. The post went viral. Comments poured in by the thousands. Stories from former students who remembered Harold. People who were touched by the idea that kindness could come full circle, even decades later. A local newspaper ran a feature. Then a national culinary magazine picked it up. But Harold didn't care about headlines. He just cared that every time he walked through the restaurant's back entrance, now fitted with a comfortable bench and coat rack just for him, someone greeted him with warmth. The staff adored him instantly. He didn't lecture. He shared. He sat in the prep room and told stories, about a time when school kids paid for lunch with coins or smiles, about how food was sometimes the only hug some children got during the day. He explained how even a simple grilled cheese could be made with love, and that a warm bowl of soup could tell someone they mattered. Victor watched it unfold like magic. The tension in his kitchen softened. The sharp edges rounded out. The staff still cooked with precision, but now they also cooked with care. And customers noticed. I don't know what it is, one regular patron said weeks later. The food tastes the same. But different. It feels warmer. Like home. One day, a family came in with their young son, clearly shy, head down, not speaking much. Harold happened to pass their table, and with Victor's encouragement, he stopped by. Not a fan of green beans? He asked the boy with a smile. The boy peeked up, startled, then shook his head. My trick? Harold said, crouching slightly. A little butter, a pinch of sugar, and not too much heat. Keeps them crunchy and sweet. Just like candy. The boy's eyes widened. Candy beans? Harold chuckled. Exactly. By the end of the meal, the boy had eaten 2 helpings of the beans, and the parents left a note, saying it was the first time he'd smiled during dinner in weeks. Victor framed the note and placed it in the staff room. This, he told his team, is what food can do. Months passed. One night, after a long day, Harold stayed late. Victor walked into the kitchen and found him sitting at a table, sipping tea. I've been thinking, Harold said. About? Retirement never suited me. But this feels right. Victor smiled. Good. Because I'm not letting you leave again. Harold looked around the room, the copper pans hanging above the counter, the flicker of candlelight through the window, the framed recipe notes on the wall, and nodded. This is home, he said softly. Victor sat beside him. And you'll always have a place here. For the first time in a long time, Victor felt his restaurant wasn't just beautiful, it was whole. It had taken years of success, acclaim, and refinement to build Maison Lumiere. But it only took one humble man to remind him what truly gave it life. Winter crept in softly along the coast, brushing the harbor with a silver chill. Maison Lumiere stood aglow against the dim sky, its warm lights spilling onto the cobblestone walkways outside. Inside, the restaurant continued to thrive, not just in reputation, but in spirit. Victor often walked the floor now, not just inspecting service but connecting, with staff, with guests, with moments. He smiled more. He even laughed. It was as if the frost that had once encased him, polished and perfect, had finally melted. The heart of that thaw sat by the prep table most evenings, Harold Evans. No longer just a guest, nor merely a mentor, Harold had become something deeper, part of the restaurant's soul. He didn't need to work the line or critique plating. His presence was enough. His stories, his quiet wisdom, his gentle encouragement, those were the ingredients that had brought a warmth back into the kitchen Victor hadn't realized was missing. One quiet Thursday night, Victor found Harold sitting in the dining room after closing, a cup of chamomile tea in front of him. The restaurant had emptied, and only the glow of candlelight danced across the polished tables. "You're still here?" Victor asked as he approached. Harold looked up and smiled. "Could ask you the same." Victor pulled out the chair opposite him and sat. "Old habits. I used to stay late reviewing supplier orders, pacing in the back, agonizing over garnish angles. Now I stay to think." Harold sipped his tea. "That's an improvement." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the quiet humming of the dishwashers in the distance like a lullaby. "I've been working on something," Victor said suddenly. "A new concept." Harold raised an eyebrow. "Do I need to worry about another foam trend?" Victor chuckled. "No more foams. I promise." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded brochure, sliding it across the table. Harold opened it carefully. At the top, printed in elegant script, were the words: Evans Table, a Maison Lumiere initiative. Beneath was a photo of a long rustic table, surrounded by guests of all ages, backgrounds, and attire, no tuxedos or gowns, just people sharing a meal. Victor watched Harold's eyes scan the description. Evans Table is a weekly event at Maison Lumiere dedicated to welcoming guests who may never have set foot in a place like this. Teachers, school cafeteria staff, foster parents, shelter volunteers, those who feed others, who nurture quietly. They'll be our honored guests. No bill. No conditions. Just a table, a meal, and respect. Inspired by the man who once fed the heart of a child. Harold looked up slowly, speechless. Victor's voice was softer now. "It's already approved. The first Evans Table is next month. I want you there to host it. To tell them what it means to be the quiet support in someone's life." Harold blinked. "Victor. This is too much." "No," Victor said, leaning forward. "It's not nearly enough." Emotion welled up in Harold's throat, but he pushed through it. "You know. When I lost everything, my job, my health, my savings, I thought I was finished. Forgotten. But somehow, this brought me back." Victor nodded. "You brought me back first." Harold placed a hand over Victor's. "Then we brought each other back." The first Evans Table was held 3 weeks later. Victor had the team rearrange the private room into a long, family-style setting. There were no starched menus or maitre d's hovering. Just candles, simple centerpieces, and dishes crafted with warmth, chicken pot pie, roasted vegetables, bread baked fresh that morning. Harold stood at the head of the table, welcoming each guest personally. Many had never dined in such a place. A woman who ran a shelter for runaway teens sat beside a retired school nurse. Across from them was a janitor who had cleaned schools for 40 years and never once been thanked by name. They were fed. They were seen. Victor stood by the doorway, watching Harold laugh with a guest over mashed potatoes, and felt something he hadn't known he needed. Peace. That night, long after the final guest had left, Victor found Harold in the kitchen, cleaning a pot he absolutely didn't need to touch. "Still can't sit still?" Victor asked, grabbing a towel. "Old habits," Harold replied with a grin. Victor turned serious. "You changed the rhythm here. Do you know that?" Harold shrugged modestly. "I just sat down and told stories. You showed us that stories are seasoning. that people come for more than food. They come for meaning. Harold looked around the kitchen, the one Victor had built, the one now filled with laughter, kindness, and second chances. He nodded slowly. You built something remarkable, Victor. I'm proud of you. Victor smiled. I'm proud of us. They stood for a moment, surrounded by the quiet warmth of a kitchen no longer driven by ego, but by heart. Years later, a new plaque was mounted near the entrance of Maison Lumiere. Tourists often passed it on the way in, brushing fingers across the etched bronze. This house is built on the memory of one meal, given in kindness. May everyone who enters here feel as seen as Harold Evans once made a hungry child feel. And below that, Evans' table, still served weekly. Inside, the food was still exquisite. But it wasn't the duck confit or the lavender soufflé that made the place special. It was the warmth, the love in the broth, the stories shared with every plate. And in the soft corner of the kitchen, there was always a chair reserved for Harold, even when he couldn't come anymore. Because his legacy didn't need him to be there in person. It lived on in every dish, in every second chance, and in every forgotten soul who finally found a place at the table.